All right, we're live. Thank you all for being patient. Starting a little bit later today, we're busy. It's that time of year. Kyle, we've been at conferences, and we normally do this every 2 weeks, but I think it's been 3 weeks. So, welcome everyone to TradeView Live. I'm your co-host Ben Tracy. I lead strategic business development at Vizion, joined here by my fellow host, our CEO and co-founder Kyle. Kyle, it's been 3 weeks. We were at Manifest. We're going to TPM. Otherwise, not a lot has happened, right? Nothing going on with Supreme Court. Everything's normal.
It's all normal. It's all normal. Yeah.
Everything's normal. No, we have a lot to
say around us.
We actually had to spend a few minutes before we started here narrowing down the topics, and we've really just picked a couple of things we want to make sure we hit on. But for anyone that's joining, that's coming here for one of the first times, why don't we go through our quick explainers? We're here to talk about TradeView. Kyle, what is TradeView?
TradeView is a solution and product offering from Vizion. It's the industry-leading trade intelligence platform. We see more trade at the shipment level than any of the other platform in the industry, 3 times more, in fact. And that's not just 3 times more in terms of shipments, also in terms of global coverage. We see shipments going in and out of every single country of the world. And we've used this data to profile the behaviors of all of the suppliers in the world, the buyers of goods, the carriers, the products that are being moved, et cetera. And of course, there's an AI researcher to help you get custom insights out of the platform.
And the data that we'll be talking about, bookings and performance and reliability, all these different indicators of global trade patterns, where does it come from?
So the data that TradeView and our other products here at Vizion sits on top of is 270 proprietary data connections we've built out over the past 6 to 7 years. And that can be coming from ocean carriers, other rail carriers, coming directly from ports and terminal operating systems, pulling in data such as AIS data as well, but making sense of all this data to understand the parties, the products, and the position of those shipments at any time.
And when we look at leading indicators, what allows us to create these predictions, these forecasts? What's unique about our data sources that enable that?
So one of the most important data sources for TradeView is ocean bookings. And so we are uniquely positioned that we receive about 40% of all the ocean bookings made worldwide every single day. And with that data, we're able to understand what is going to be shipped, and then we actively track those shipments. And so this allows us to forecast how volumes are going to be moving through the network, where potentially performance will change the network because of those volume changes. Fundamentally, because an ocean booking is typically made 8 to maybe 12 weeks before delivery.
Great. And we started this almost a year ago now, talking about booking volumes that plummeted, that went back up, that seemed to be below their typical volume for a lot of last year. What's happened in just the past few weeks? When we look at all shipments being booked globally, shipments going to the US, and specifically that China to US, with everything that's changed from the Supreme Court to Chinese New Year to the Red Sea, what does shipping demand look like for the past few weeks?
Well, we have the ocean bookings data pulled up here on the screen. And in terms of global bookings, we can see week over week changes, year over year changes. And this most recent week we're reporting is week of February 16th. Note that, this is starting to get into the heart of the Lunar New Year, Chinese New Year. And so seeing things such as year over year changes of 38% is not surprising. Now, why it's a year over year so much change when we look at it on a weekly basis is, Lunar New Year, Chinese New Year shifts a little bit each year.
Different weeks. we're comparing here. So you have one a few weeks ago, which was seemingly 100% more booking volume than we saw the year before, but it's because that was an earlier Lunar New Year, Chinese New Year.
Yes, the surging in anticipation, right?
Got it.
Yep.
There are other weeks here that look to be a little bit of a year-over-year increase. When you look at earlier in January, right after that initial surge, and so there's some activity here. I think what we wanted to show next was specifically a daily breakdown, just because of what's happening now, even going by week with different weeks we're comparing with different holidays in mind. With the Supreme Court decision striking down the IEEPA tariffs, and then the sort of new tactic of implementing tariffs at 10%, potentially 15%, still to be confirmed. What's happened in just the past few days? When we look at daily booking volume, which we normally don't show, by the way, there's some volatility here. We'll look at that in just a moment. I think before we go to daily booking volume, did we have another visual here?
I think it's just the usual charts we share breaking down these global U.S. import and China to U.S. bookings
over the past 3 years too, or the past 2 years. So in this case, earlier in 2026, we are actually above 2025 and 2024 levels. So we were showing an increase in demand. Again, some of that can be attributed to that pre-Chinese New Year surge, which we were definitely seeing, and some of it might have just been increased demand. But in the most recent week, obviously a big drop, which is not surprising.
Also want to share, remember the context as well around 2025, about this time last year, maybe a few weeks earlier, and going into the tail end of 2024, that's when we were starting to see also, not just earlier Chinese New Year surges, but also front loading that many companies were doing in anticipation of the second Trump administration coming into power.
Yep.
So, but even taking that into account, we have one of the highest surges in terms of global bookings around the Lunar New Year that we've seen in quite some time.
And I think we saw that for U.S. import bookings as well. And that's more that apples to apples comparison of that surge prior to Trump's second administration beginning, which we looks like we just about equaled. Or no, I'm sorry, we exceeded it. That yellow line is actually from 2 years ago.
We did exceed it. And this is an interesting note as well, because the effects that have been happening in the industry right now has been an interesting combination of demand shifting geographically. So there is less demand for ocean freight shipments between kind of China and the US than there were in the past, predominantly in response to the tariffs over the past almost year. But China needed to go find demand they wanted to fulfill. And so they have fundamentally shifted a lot of export volumes to other countries at this point. And a lot of that demand was found in Europe as well. So what's interesting is when you see this global bookings where it's like 2.2 million, but we're coming here to like the US bookings where it was, 350, 375 last year. We peaked 400 a few weeks ago. This is, indicative of that, a little bit of a pre-Chinese New Year rush, but I would have expected had, this not been a tariff world, if that had never happened, if this was an alternate, universe in some way, shape, or form, I would have expected this red line to be even higher in that Chinese New Year rush. But that volume, that demand and supply has shifted to the Asia and Europe relationship now.
Yeah, absolutely. And you see
that
it
more here, China, US bookings.
China to US bookings were still not anywhere above where we were. Even that pre-Chinese New Year rush was well below the pre-Chinese New Year rush in years before, where you see in that blue and yellow line, that spike going upward. We didn't come close to it.
And you may have been seeing in news headlines in the earlier this year that oh, maybe 2026 is going to be a soft demand year for ocean freight, et cetera, et cetera. Oh, that's why the rates are falling so dramatically, et cetera, et cetera. The reality is that those headlines are wrong, because global bookings wise, it's doing better than it ever has done
Yeah.
at this time of year. It's just the reality is many of those headlines are only talking to shippers that are trying to bring things into the United States and can only really look at the US Customs and Border Patrol import data, which is latent after deliveries are completed.
Right.
We're looking at bookings. So this is a forward-looking indicator of what's going to happen. And so, yes, there is less demand in sending stuff from China to the US market now than there used to be. But there is more demand than ever for ocean freight in certainly this time window we're talking about.
Right, and I think just there's more data out there, whether it's USCBP. I think the Port of Long Beach put out numbers just a couple of days ago about the month of January. I think it was 18% or
Mhm.
17% down year on year. Again, Long Beach, the vast majority of the freight coming in there comes from China. So you're going to see those headlines, and you're going to think that, yeah, demand for shipping globally is down, when in fact it's really that
It's shifted.
Asia to US trade lane.
Yeah.
So I did want to come back to what I was talking about earlier with the daily view. So this is all U.S. imports looking at a daily volume, and the question we wanted to ask is: with the Supreme Court ruling, is there this sudden surge now to book freight to come into the U.S., especially when you think about countries like Brazil and India that had 50% tariffs? Um, what we're seeing is basically no. There's not this sudden reaction, at least in the past 3 days, when we're talking about the ruling on Friday and then looking at bookings from Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday.
Yeah.
We don't see this sudden surge, but this is daily booking volume where you did see earlier in the year, so roughly in the second to third week of January, we were at volumes above last year. So that pre-Chinese New Year rush was in some ways, at least as far as that view at a daily level, exceeding last year's levels. But in recent weeks, we've been below. And in the past couple of days, you don't see anything taking off for U.S. import bookings overall.
And, a few interesting notes here as well. I'll add, so the orangish line here is this year, 2026. This is the heart of the Chinese New Year slowdown or shutdown, right? So you're seeing a very much lower volume of bookings being made for U.S. imports. Now, this is all U.S. imports, so this could be coming from anywhere, not just China, but China is a major chunk of it, so that's why you're seeing it down. But this where I'm putting the laser pointer right now, that is the day 50. So that is the day the Supreme Court ruling was announced. There was a weekend, and pretty much starting back on Monday, it seems like we're getting back to normal bookings that you would be expecting. It's a little bit lower than 2025, but not a lot lower. So maybe there's a small response. Let's wait and see reaction. The kind of wait and see reaction that if you go back to 2025, this was inauguration day about right here. And then you started getting executive orders that were showing up within a few days later. And then, a little bit of a wait and see week as well playing out there.
But I think it will be interesting to look at this in 2 weeks and see if, whether it's patterns from China to US bookings or US imports from countries like Brazil and India, we can take deep dives into. We just, with only 3 days of booking volume, there's not enough to really tell right now, but certainly there's not a sudden overnight huge surge.
Not like we saw on the day after Liberation Day in April last year, where there was a complete collapse of bookings from China to the US.
Yeah, exactly. And I do just before we go to this, I do have a daily view for China to Europe bookings. If we're able to switch the screen here, this is from the TradeView app live. We didn't have time to get this into the slides, but this is a similar view. This is from China to Europe. Similar conclusion here, right? You have the kind of normal daily booking volume. Obviously, those drops represent each weekend. Then you have the past 7 days with the Lunar New Year. Where it's resumed to now not a sudden spike. And just wanted to show that kind of normal side by side. Obviously, there's not any huge changes right now for European tariffs imposed on Chinese goods, but we're seeing very similar daily booking volume right after the Lunar New Year.
Ben, could you change this real quick to just show again China to US day by day? Because the slide we were just showing was anywhere in the world to the US, but since the Supreme Court ruling has been a big question for many of our customers, it'd be good to dig in at the daily level now to be seeing bookings China to the US. You can, and this way you get to see how quick it is to use TradeView to answer these types of questions.
All right, let me grab that and make a quick chart here. There we go.
Yeah.
China and US. Yep.
It looks like it's getting back to business as normal, relatively speaking. You know, they're a little higher than weeks before, but that's the pre-Chinese New Year surge.
Exactly. Okay. So with the time that we have left, and considering that it's tender season and TPM next week, a lot of folks are asking questions about what they're being promised from carriers in terms of performance and reliability, and whether or not that aligns with the actual data. So what are we looking at here, Kyle? And what data did this take into account? I think it's a pretty large pool of shipment volume, right?
Yeah, you're getting a sneak peek of a report we're going to be making available at the Trans-Pacific Maritime Conference in Long Beach, starting on Sunday. And we did an assessment of 35 million container trips over 2025 across 24 different carriers, and then did weighted performance scoring across all of them and breaking it down to not just trade lanes, but also to like region to region and sub-region to sub-region routings. And looking at the quality of their performance based upon the ETAs they provide. So a little bit different than what you might look at if you're like talking about like schedule reliability. We're looking at this from the perspective of when a shipment was booked and the first ETA was provided by the carrier, which is sometimes at the time of booking, sometimes at the time that the empty container is provided, maybe only upon the full container being gated in at the origin port. But we look at the very first ETA the carriers provide, and we ask, how accurate is that? And then we bucket it, did it arrive the day they said it was going to arrive? Did it arrive early? Did it arrive late? How early or how late? And we did analysis, turning that into a score of performance. But we're giving detailed charts and recommendations. And this is a chart you're seeing real quick of reliability versus volatility metric. And so average on-time report performance is listed here on the right. And again, remember, this is based upon the first ETA provided, not vessel schedules or anything like that.
Yes.
This is
very different than schedule reliability. This is actual
operational container level ETAs.
Yeah.
But then also looking at volatility. So doing a measurement based upon the distribution of arriving early, arriving late, etc.
Right.
And carriers that are able to stay closest to their ETA in terms of time have less volatility, so higher up on the chart. And so we're kind of getting this sweet spot where, the average on-time performance of someone like a Maersk, a Hapag-Lloyd, a Costco, might be lower than, say, a Zim, for example, because they might be arriving early or a day or two late. But that distribution window of when they arrive is far more narrow, puts them in this green box to more heavily consider because they're a more consistent carrier to work with. Versus someone like a Zim might have on some routes great performance, but then on other routes, it's extremely variable performance.
Right. It could be off by more than 10 days or more. That's that volatility. Got it. So on-time performance is just, were they accurate within plus or minus a day or two? Volatility is like when they were not accurate.
How bad is the delay?
Yeah. I like the combination of the two, and this is going to be great to walk through customers.
And we're just looking at overall right now. We have this actually broken out by trade lane, by specific routes. And so you are able to use this guide we're providing to have a bit, say, more data-driven approach to your carrier mix for the routes you carry about.
Yeah.
So come on by the booth if you're going to be at TPM, or send us an email. We're happy to be giving this report out. And it's also possible to customize this report in more detail. Let's say you want to see this just based upon shipments that were for companies in a specific industry, or for certain types of products or goods, or if you only want to see this for refrigerated containers, for example. All of that is possible and can be.
And even if you're not going to be at TPM, happy to set up a meeting and review the report with you. We've got a lot of different views, ways we can customize it by trade lane, by companies of similar size to you in terms of their shipment volume, and some of those other dimensions Kyle mentioned. So this delay risk matrix, that's a new one.
Yeah, so this is looking at major routes. And so this is more than just trade lanes, right? So central China to kind of the Western Europe, Northern Europe, UK, and then like Southeast Asia to US West Coast, for example. We're looking at what the severe delay issues were. And so a severe delay is greater than 10 days. And when those delays occurred, how bad was it? So we're looking at, Hyundai Merchant Marine across all of these different routes. But then let's say we go look at someone like Maersk. So we're experiencing, moderate levels of 10 or more day delay risk. So Maersk, 14% of the shipments we looked at from central China to effectively Northern Europe were delayed by more than 10 days. For central China, the U.S. to the Western Mediterranean, it was about the same here. But if we look at like central China to Southeast Asia, so even inter-Asia, we're seeing pretty meaningful delays of 10 plus days. But again, when you look at, someone who might be like a CMA or an Evergreen or a Hyundai, you have a much higher percentage of variability.
Right.
If something goes wrong, it's going to go real wrong.
So it's sort of another view of that volatility, but really breaking it down by trade lane, by percentage of volatile shipments. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, the last two slides we were showing were just page 33 and page 32 in this full-blown report. And we're still doing some work on it, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is in excess of 60 to 70 pages in the end, going into great detail.
Yeah. So a lot of different views, different ways. We want to offer this as you're planning on your carrier commitments, your MQCs, and your allocations. And there's a lot of promises being out there to win the business of shippers. We want to make sure that there's accurate data to go with those promises as well.
Yeah.
So, reach out with any questions or feedback.
And the good carriers are happy to take a premium rate right now to make sure you get access to the good service, right? With freight rates being so low due to
the premium rate might not be as much of a premium as it has been in years past.
That's right. And it gets back to the old story in this industry that it's better for everyone when everyone works together to everyone's benefit. It's not a zero-sum game. So BCOs working with carriers to make sure they're having more reliability, less volatility, and rates that both sides are happy with is a better place to be than I think we see the industry going towards right now.
Agreed. Well, thank you all for your time. We're ending right on time. And we'll talk again after TPM in 2 weeks. All right. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you all. Cheers.